Welcome back to today's episode of Words of the Wise. Today I have Chief Cordova from Tremonton in Garland PD in Utah. He has almost 18 years experience in law enforcement. He is a graduate of the FBI Executive Command College and a graduate of Northwestern University School of Police Staff and Command. Welcome to the show, Chief Cordova. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Of course, I'm looking forward to it. So we were talking offline a little bit, and I called you out, and I said you're a young chief, and I could
Yeah.
tell, but also, 18 years experience in law enforcement, and I've had a few conversations because, I think that we are seeing a younger generation being promoted and rising through the ranks and entering into these chief positions, and I think it brings maybe a breath of fresh air or new perspective. And I had someone else on the podcast that was talking about this and how they think that you need that. You need to have different perspectives all across the organization. So, can you give us a little bit of background into the trajectory of your career and maybe your perspective on leadership and promoting early?
Yeah. So as far as my career goes, I started with a larger agency. I believe it was the second biggest agency in Utah, and that's Unified Police Department. It was kind of a regional style where we served multiple cities. Um, that was a great experience. I went on to be a detective. I worked different areas like burglary, narcotics. I've served on the SWAT team for a number of years. A lot of great opportunities, a lot of growth over that time. I was one of the younger sergeants to test at the time, and they gave preference points for time on, so I had to really put in extra effort to stand out. I was fortunate enough to place number two on the list, and I was promoted early, which is good and bad, right? I mean, I lacked some of the experiences, some of the more senior guys, but I had a fresh perspective, and I was just really coming from a place of wanting to make a positive impact. Doing that for a couple of years, it was great. I love patrol. I had the opportunity to promote to a detective sergeant position, and best job I ever had at the time. It was a lot of fun. We were very proactive. We dealt with gangs, drugs, even some cartel stuff. It was really cool. And then from there, I had the opportunity to test for lieutenant early, and a lot of this was the policy through education. At the time, I had my master's degree, so I was allowed to test early. And I was placed on the promotionary list. A friend of mine reached out and told me about this opportunity to be a chief. And I had applied at the same time I was on the lieutenant's list. And I was unanimously selected by the council. So I got put into the big seat pretty early in the career, considering, a lot of guys will do this career 30, 40 years. So it's been great. It's a great opportunity, and I'm thankful for it. I do think that there is definitely positive things by having younger people in command positions and having them see it through a different lens, because a lot's changed. I mean, law enforcement today is completely different than it was, even 5, 10 years ago, let alone 20, 30 years ago. So I think the other advantage is we have an ability to connect with the new generation of law enforcement officers on a different level. And it really helps with recruitment and getting the right people in the right places in the job. So yeah, I can't complain. It's been a great experience, and yeah.
Yeah, I love it. I can actually relate to some of the things that you were saying. And early in my career, I was very much like you. Like, I was very driven. I was like, I want to learn as much as I can, and I'm going to work really hard, and I want, these opportunities. And I had gotten an opportunity to work for a place that my mentor and someone who I really looked up to worked. And I was like, I'm going to absorb everything. I'm going to learn everything I possibly can. And I would literally have like my ear to the door, like just trying to listen to everything that they were saying so that I could like be like them. And I was told that, by working there, I was going to be given the opportunity to work there eventually. And I never got the opportunity. And I remember being there for a few years, and I was like, man, like I got to get more experience. Like I got to put myself out there. I feel like I need like more boots on the ground so that I can, and I told my boss at the time, I was like, hey, like I think I got to go out on my own, and I think I got to get some experience so that I can be the best, I can possibly be. And they looked at me and they said, the only reason why you would get the opportunity is if, basically it was a seniority thing. They're like, the only way that you would get it is if you work here. There are a lot of people who have more experience than you, and there's a long line of people who want this job. And I'm not going to give it to you if you don't work here. And I said, okay. And I left because I told them, I said, I would rather get the job because I'm the best for the job, not just because I work here, I have some sort of seniority. And I ended up going out on my own, and I was hired there a year later as one of their top instructors. So I think you can have both. And of course, like you want experience. But I think for me, it was like, I don't want the job just because I have seniority. I want the job because I'm the best for the job. And I think that, and I don't know if that's your opinion too, but I think that that's what we should be looking at. It's like, who is the best person for these positions, and how do we place them, in the best possible way so that they are prepared for that? Even if they don't maybe have as much experience as someone else, how can we prepare them for that proactively?
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that. I couldn't agree more. And unfortunately, in law enforcement, I believe a lot of the agencies are designed around seniority.
Mm.
And with that comes a systemic problem. Sometimes we promote the wrong people with good intentions. The intentions are always good. You've been here a long time, you've paid your dues, now you get promoted. And then we pass up on some of the better people we could be promoting. And it's the way the system's designed. And that's part of what took me away from the larger organization. Changing a culture is hard.
Mm.
Changing anything in law enforcement is hard. But we talked briefly before we went live about moral courage. You just defined what that is by your experience, because it took courage for you to see that you wanted a job based on merit, not just by being there a long time. And I think that's something we really can fix in law enforcement. I fixed it in this agency as the chief, and I hope to continue to do that wherever this career takes me in the future. But I think a reform in that area would be huge across the board because a lot of these old school structures are based on the culture of seniority. And then what you end up seeing is some of the guys that don't work as hard and don't have that drive make the most money and they get the best positions. And then you have the guys that are really going out and doing extra above and beyond and representing the agency well. And they're the low man on the totem pole for years and years and years. So, yeah, you hit the nail on that.
Thank you. And, I think that always asking ourselves why and can we do things better? I think that is always going to move the ball forward in a positive direction. And we can talk about that in our own personal lives. We can talk about that in our professional lives. But I think that the way that things have always been done, and that's just the way things are, is stagnancy. Like you're going to be stagnant, or there's complacency in that, right? It's like, if we can always ask ourselves, are we doing it the best way? Is this the most effective? Is this what's best for the organization? Is this what's best for the people within the organization? And sometimes maybe the answer is yes. But I think by us having those brainstorming sessions and asking the why, then we're able to identify, are there different ways of doing things that maybe are better?
Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't agree more.
Did you have mentors while you were coming up that really kind of shaped who you are as a leader, or how did you get to the position that you are now with the philosophies that you have now?
Yeah, great question. Yes, I did have mentors. And early in my career, I was also going to school. And I remember one particular assignment a professor gave me, and it was to interview. It was actually a business management class, and it was to interview people that are in the top of your field and get different perspectives. So,
Mm.
much like you, I had the opportunity to talk to many chiefs, and what I thought I would get and what I actually got were two different things. So, one of my questions were, "What was your favorite job in law enforcement? Do you actually enjoy your job?" Things like that. And I always had this assumption from the line level looking up, and I couldn't be more wrong. So across the board, every chief I talked to in a moment of honesty and vulnerability said it is not their favorite job. The job is hard, it's taxing, and there's a lot of politics. And I got a lot of information I was kind of ignorant to at the time. The other thing, one of the chiefs said to me, it stuck with me and still does to this day, is everyone you encounter is a mentor. They're either going to show you the right way to do things or the wrong way to do things. So he said, a misfire across the board in leadership is people just look at great examples. He said, look at bad examples, look at why they're bad examples, ask yourself those questions, and don't do that. And then he said, you look to the people that are successful, making an impact, the people you want to be like, and then do that. So you kind of have the yin and yang of the situation, the positives and negatives. I did have a mentor. I still talk to him to this day. I was fortunate enough to work alongside him most of my career. He was my sergeant when I first started. His name is Levi, great guy, and now he's the chief of Kearns in Utah. But he was always just a shining example of what to be. He was great with people. He put his officers first, and I saw that, and he really stood by the right things regardless of the blowback he faced. And that's kind of what I grew up seeing. And to this day, I don't know everything. I reach out to others. I try to have a network of really good leaders that I can pick their brain and solve problems together. But yeah, he was probably one of my biggest mentors throughout my career.
Thank you. I appreciate that. There's so many things that you said that I want to circle back to. I was writing notes. I love that you said the biggest misfire is only looking at good examples, and I couldn't agree with you more. I think that for me, I had a lot of, I actually had a lot of fear in my life, and this is maybe a personal story, but I didn't have a mom present at all in my life, and she was active in addiction. And when she was in my life, it was very toxic. And I remember growing up and being like, well, I didn't have a good example of what a mom is like, and therefore I can never be a good mom. And I think that there are people out there, if you think about this in a professional perspective, there might be people out there who do work for organizations where they're like, wow, I don't feel like I have a good example of what a good leader is, and therefore I cannot be that. And I think the reverse is true. I think that you have to take the things that you know are not the best, and then you have to develop yourself to do the opposite, right? And so now, as I've gotten older, I understand, because I went through that and I didn't have a good example, in my case, of what a mom looked like. That's exactly why I'm going to be an excellent mother. And I think for leadership, it's the same. It's like, take all the good that you can. And if you don't have examples of good, take the bad and turn it into good. Make a change for yourself, because you know exactly how you don't want to feel or how you don't want to make people feel, and you have the ability to control those things and learn from those things. So I love that you said that, because I couldn't agree more. I also had this conversation recently about managers versus leaders. And this idea that there are some people who just want to keep their job, and there's people who want to do their job. And I love that you said this person who was a mentor for you, that they were wanting to do their job, even if it meant that there was blowback, even if that meant that maybe it risks their own position, because they know that there is a greater mission or greater good that they're trying to accomplish.
Yeah. Well, circling back, it's funny you talk about your experience growing up. I actually share that with you. I grew up with a single mom and in a very bad neighborhood, and we didn't have much in my family. And the majority of my family fall into what sociology would expect them to, right? They continue that cycle. And I share that perspective with you as I saw what I didn't want my whole life growing up. So I made it a point to not do that. And I think you're going to be an excellent mom. And the reason I say that is I grew up without a dad, and I had that same bias. And now that I am a dad, it's so much more important to me than anything. It's such a top priority. And I'm doing things that I would have wanted to have my father do. Those negative experiences shape us in a positive way. It's all about perspective. But yeah, that's really powerful. And just swinging back to the manager versus leaders, yes, I think being a leader is a great thing to say, and we all like to call ourselves that, but it's really tested uh, when you're willing to put yourself in danger to protect others. And law enforcement, we're trained to do that, right? We run towards the danger, the gunfire, the unknown without hesitation. It's programmed in us. As a leader, especially as a chief, you're going to at some point encounter a time where you need to choose between doing what's right or what's going to keep you the safest. I think that's what really tests leadership. And I'd love to say, you know, in my career, I've worked with so many chiefs. I'd love to say they always go to doing the right thing. It's just not true. And I understand why. You could lose your job. You could get in serious trouble publicly. But at the end of the day, we have to look at ourselves in the mirror. And it's absolutely important that we do the right things by the people that represent citizens and our community and keep people safe. I mean, cops are the most selfless people you ever meet. I know there's horror stories, and I'm not saying there are no bad cops in the world, but I've been doing this 18 years, and I can honestly say every single person I've encountered in my career has done right by people, and they're truly selfless, and they just want to serve and take care of others. So I feel like it's our duty to take care of them.
Yeah, I agree with you. Obviously, I think you guys are the only career ever in the history of ever that one person or, maybe a small percentage of people do bad things and it affects everybody. You never see a surgeon who maybe does something, wrong, then all of a sudden everyone thinks all surgeons are bad, and
Yeah.
in my experience, and I've, you know, been in this space for a while, I've had a lot of conversations and opportunities to meet people. I've met some of the best, most caring people ever, people who don't even know me and are genuinely interested in my well-being and will have a line of, communication open always. Like, call me if you need anything. I had a chief, actually, this meant a lot to me. I had a chief in Texas give me his card because I have family in Texas. And he goes, give this to your family. And if they ever need anything, call me. And I was like, wow, like he didn't have to do that. Like open lines. And like I gave it to my family that lives out there. My cousin has two little kids. And she was like, oh my gosh, like that's incredible. She was so excited. And so I think that we have to recognize that. And I think it's so easy sometimes to fixate or focus on the negative, even if it is the minority, than it is to recognize the positive. And I think we do this in our own lives too, and I've done this so many times where I'm like, this is bad and this is bad and this is bad and everything's going, awful. And then like my partner will be like, wait, but like these things were really good. Like, do you remember that? And I'm like, oh yeah, like we have to remind ourselves that like a lot of times these negative things or experiences that we have are the minority and the majority is positive. We just have to remind ourselves so that we can continue to look for those things in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. I just think the negative things are the loudest, especially in our mind. We want to solve problems. That's what we do. But we give a lot of attention to a lot of things that could be negative that we aren't even sure are negative yet. And I think it's important that we are able to let go of the job and be present in the moment as much as possible. It's hard to do, especially when we program cops. And this kind of goes into what you're doing with wellness. We program them to always think of the worst case scenario, always have a plan for the worst thing. And it creates a lot of stress and cortisol and all kinds of bad things that impact their health. But we don't also really put a lot of time into the care. How do we break them out of that? How do we give them true time off? How do we make sure they stay healthy and have a long, successful career? So, yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's important to keep perspective, and there are a lot of negative things, and we see a ton of that, unfortunately, in law enforcement, and it can make you feel jaded towards the world. But there's also a lot of good out there, and it's important that we keep that mindfulness.
Yeah. Yeah. And you've said perspective a few times throughout our conversation. And I think that's one thing that we can control. And how can we flip the script and how can we understand that, yes, bad things are going to happen, stressful things are going to happen, but are there, is there lemonade in the lemons? Is there a way for us to look at it with a different perspective? Or can we grow from it? Can we learn from it? Even though it was something really terrible, is there a way for us to do things better next time? Or for us to take care of ourselves better on the back end? What does that look like? And so that is one thing that we can control is the way that we view things and how we respond to things. And I definitely want to dive into the wellness, aspect with you. But my question for you, because I think we say these words a lot, and a lot of people aren't able to define what that means. What is your definition of resiliency? And how, as a leader, have you been able to develop resilient or a resilient organization?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of proactive things we've done. So when I first started here, there was a lot of challenges we faced as a smaller department. And I guess the best analogy is you take uh, a modern day police department and you look back 40 years, 40 years, that's where we were when I came here. So the first thing I had to do is bring it up to modern times as far as like policies, procedures, what we do, the equipment we have, the whole nine yards. But one of the biggest glaring issues I saw, and I know this from experience over 18 years, is we had no form of engaged peer support. And so I worked to establish that first and foremost, making sure that we start to work towards being open about debriefing things that we saw that were disturbing and not just holding it and saying, okay, you're fine, go home and expect everything to be okay. That's where I started in this career. That's kind of how it was. You would sustain like a emotional injury and there was no treatment and you were expected to come back in and just go to the next call like nothing happened. And I know how destructive that could be in my life and in my experience. And I wanted to do better by my guys. So finding a group of people, the right people to put on peer support, the people that others naturally confine in. At the time, we had some really great officers that had that ability to engage and empower them with the tools they need to know how to help first responders through that. We partnered with this other organization. He's a former law enforcement officer in Utah named Jeff Denning, and now he does a lot of mental health stuff. They came out, they helped train our guys. When we have major incidents, we can call upon them. They'll come out and help us debrief those things and really just creating a new culture of let's make sure that we're taking care of people after the call. That's top priority. We take everybody, we bring them aside, we put them in uh, as a group, and people can share. And just debriefing those things is so impactful. I mean, it really helps so much. That's one of the things we've done. Additionally, we've had an extra hard time here. As you're aware, we lost two officers less than a year ago, and one thing we established after that is checking up on each other. So one of our senior cops, really great guy, came up with this idea, and we call it a buddy check. And basically, you check in on your buddy, and just randomly throughout the day, and you say, oh, okay, 1 to 10, what are you? 1, you're doing fantastic, best day of your life. 10, it's the worst day of your life. And we just made sure we're checking on people. And if they hit the number like 7 plus, we would find a way to break them free, put them in contact with somebody, send them home to be with their family, whatever we had to do to make sure we're caring for people. And that was huge. And it was humbling for me to be a part of that because I was getting texts. I was having people pop on my office, always asking me what I was on a 1 for 10. And I knew they were doing it for each other. And it's just great. To your point in your story, you had a chief selflessly willing to help you guys and give you his probably personal phone number and say, if you ever need anything. What's funny is all cops are like that, man. They are just so selfless and willing to help. I could call somebody and say I have a flat tire or my sink's leaking, and I'll have 4 guys wanting to run over and help me. We're also the very worst at asking for help. No matter how much we need it, most cops would let their house flood before they ask their partner, who's a plumber, to come help fix it. So that's part of the education too, making sure they know it's okay to help, and it actually helps the person offering, feel like they're doing good by you, and maybe it encourages them down the road to accept your help.
Yeah.
So we really embrace that culture of being there for one another.
I love that. I've never heard of the buddy check in the scale of 1 to 10. I I heard a definition of resiliency one time that I really liked, and they said it's, how quickly can you get back to baseline? And I'm a really visual person, so I always think of like our life as like peaks and valleys. It's not straight,
Yeah.
but the goal is straight, right? It's like how can you be level through all of life's ups and downs? Because that's the quickest way. If we're taking these detours and we're going up and we're going down, it's going to take us longer to get where we want to go. So it's almost this idea of like stoicism a little bit. It's like, how can you self-regulate and how can you avoid getting too high during the highs and too low during the lows? And for me, I think if you can maintain that steadiness as much as possible, that's more of that, regulation, but it's going to create longevity and quality of life. And to me, I think we've talked a lot about longevity, but we're missing the quality of life part. It's like, yes, we want people to live long, but like we want them to live long well. We don't want them to live a long time and they get to the end and they're just completely shattered. How can we put in place resources proactively that get them to the finish line as well and happy and healthy and whole as we possibly can? And I love this idea of how can we proactively check in on people and how can we ask better questions? Because we know, to your point, that if I say, hey, how are you doing? Which is such a surface level question, right? Like, and we're all conditioned to say, good, fine,
Yeah.
great, and then everyone just takes that as truth. And they're like, all right, cool. And like walk away. And sometimes people don't even stay long enough to hear your answer. They're just like, hey, how are you? And then they walk away and you're like, good, as you're like waving to their back. So for you to say, hey, on a scale of 1 to 10, how are you today? This is very worst, this is very best. It encourages better responses from people. So I really like that a lot because I think that it opens up the door and you have to stick around and you have to listen to their response. If I ask you on a scale of 1 to 10, how are you? And then I just walk away, like, so for you to create that culture of asking better questions and proactively checking on people and then understanding early if people need resources because they are having a tough time or carrying a heavy backpack, then you can be better suited to give them the resources that they need in order to reach that optimal level that you're looking for.
Yeah, absolutely. And I couldn't agree more with the Stoic mindset of, you know, um, don't hold on to things that aren't yours. An example, I saw this video and I forget where I saw it, but it was a professor and he's holding a glass of water and he asked the students, how much does this weigh? And they're all asking, they're taking guess, 6 ounces, 8 ounces. He said that the weight of the cup doesn't matter. It's how long you hold on to it. If I hold it for 5 minutes, it's virtually weightless. If I hold it for 10 minutes, an hour, 2 hours, 8 hours, after 8 hours, my arm's dead. And one thing we do is we get a lot of weight from other things in law enforcement, first responders on the fire side. We see a lot of things that are really heavy. And the more we hold on to those, the more weight it puts on you. And it will manifest itself. That's one thing I learned early in my career. You think you can just ignore that or outrun those things that you saw or you experienced? You can. When you go to bed, it's all at the front of your mind. So I think it's really important that we teach that to the best ability we can, so people know how to let those things go, focus on what really matters, and build the idea that you can stay in the middle, not just a peak, not just the valley. You can try to stay as baseline as possible. And a lot of that comes down to, mental health care, physical fitness, the things we can control in our world and not trying to worry so much about the things we can't control. So
Yeah.
I'm still working on it after 18 years, but it's definitely something I'm very focused on. And I think that's the goal, to have a long, healthy, happy career.
Yeah, I think it's never about perfection. And I think that so often, and I know I'm a perfectionist at heart, like I want everything to be perfect. I'm very much that person. And I've had to work really hard to understand that perfection is an illusion. It doesn't exist. And, there's learning in the imperfections. But I think having the self-awareness of saying, hey, I'm still working on it. Some days are better than others. Sometimes I hold on to things that I shouldn't, and I recognize that. And I'm just trying each day to be a little bit better or a little bit more aware. And I think that that's all we can hope for. And there was a girl, I know you said you did like a business thing. Are you familiar with the Hermoses?
Sounds familiar, but it's escaping me right now.
So they're a married couple, and they were in the fitness world. They created, so the husband owned a bunch of gyms, and then they created a business called Gym Launch, where they helped gyms make more money, sold it for a bunch of money, and now they work with acquisition channels. So they're like acquiring different companies, and they're like worth billions of dollars or something crazy. But they put out a lot of content about business and culture, and they're people that I really like to follow because I think they have a lot of really good advice. So I'd recommend it. But the wife, her name's Layla. And someone asked her about, her perspective on stress. And it was very similar to what you said. She's like, stress can only impact me if I hold on to it. If I let it go, like if I let it slide off my back, then it's not going to impact me. And so I think it's this idea of what you said of, how can we offload those things? How can we let things go and understand that the only way out of things is through? Like we have to be able to move forward. And that's hard for me too. I'm working on that as well. But I liked that statement. She's like, the only way stress is going to impact me is if I hold on to it. If I get through it and I move on, then it's not going to be something that, even affects me on a day to day. And I think we can do these in micro moments, or we can also look at this from a bigger scale too. I think there's a little micro moments throughout the day that could be stressful, that we, kind of linger on. Maybe it's a conversation, or we don't like how someone's tone, or, traffic or whatever. How can we not hold on to those things, and how can we let those things go? My question for you is, you said earlier that, and I actually had two conversations today about the same topic about, maybe some agencies who are still not prioritizing wellness in the way that they should. Maybe they're still, back, like, would you say back 20 years, and you have to kind of bring
Yeah.
current. Um, why do you think that there are still some leaders that don't see the value in wellness? And what are those conversations that we can have to where people do understand that it is a have to have and not a nice to have?
Yeah, I would say it's a cultural issue. Thinking back, we went through a couple fire chiefs out here, but talking to a well-respected one once we were starting those efforts with peer support, he was supportive, but offline the conversations were, he's like, well, why are we doing this? We never had this. I'm not really into the huggy emotional stuff. And I think it's a cultural thing. I saw this on the SWAT team as well when I was going through it. We went through something called Hell Week. I'm sure you've heard of it, but basically it is like a torture fest, right? And what's interesting, and I was breaking it down, and there is some good training, so I don't want to take away, but a lot of it is a gut check. Are you tough enough? Can you get through it? And I started asking why, because, I'm the younger guy on the team and I didn't understand. And when I was talking to the senior guys, it was, well, because we had to go through it, because we had to do this. So now you have to do it. And then you're going to do it to the next guy. And while the training had value, the Hell Week had no value. You know what I mean? I feel like you should test physical attributes, mental toughness, but some of it was just for the sake of, uh, I don't know the politically correct way to say this, but it was just for the sake of seeing if you stuck around through hell.
Mm,
And I didn't see a lot of value in that. So I think culturally, a lot of the old school mindset and its different generations and how they were raised and what they were told to value are kind of holding that back. And they also fail to self-reflect, I think, and see like how negative some of those things have been on them personally. I mean, I knew a guy that had been in law enforcement for multiple years, great dude, old school. He had been divorced like 8 times. So people would always make fun of him. It was the butt of every joke. And I don't think that's a coincidence. I think that's signaling something's going on. And either he had the worst luck with the marrying the wrong people, or he was the problem.
yeah.
But I think a lot of it, a lot of wisdom can be found in ourself and reflecting on ourselves. And that's another benefit of having, younger leaders from the newer generation is they understand the value in those things. And my philosophy has always been, I want better for my guys than I had growing up in this agency. So I've embraced that and I'm forging it forward. And I just hope more leaders do that. And I mean, if they need evidence of it, it's all there, as you can look at suicide rates, you can look at alcoholism, all the standard stereotypical things associated with a long career in law enforcement. And sadly, a lot of those live out to become a reality unless we are proactive in addressing it now.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think there's a couple things, but one, I think that we have to get out of our own way sometimes. And I'm super guilty of this. I've talked about this before on the podcast, but just because something's not important to you doesn't mean that it's not important to someone else. Just because something doesn't affect you doesn't mean that it's not going to affect somebody else, you know? And so I think that we have to get out of our own way and understand that it's not about us, that it's about everybody else and the things that they need. But I'm also a really big fan of outcome driven conversations. And I think sometimes we're so focused on method driven conversations that we get lost in it. And so when you say, like, oh, I'm not into like the huggy stuff or the woo woo stuff or whatever, it's like, first of all, wellness doesn't have to be huggy woo woo. But I think instead of saying, hey, you know, for example, like I say this all the time. If I walked into a briefing and I said, hey, how many of you guys want to do a breathing technique right now? Depending on the agency, maybe a couple people will raise their hand, maybe zero will raise their hand, who knows? But if I walked into, a roll call or a briefing and I said, how many of you want to sleep better? A lot of people are going to raise their hand. That's an outcome driven conversation. The outcome that people are wanting is they want to sleep better, right? And so I think if we can have these outcome conversations of like, what's the goal? Is the goal to make sure that your people, don't take their lives, or make sure that your people have long and successful careers? Or is your goal that, your team can show up and be safe out on the streets? Like, what is that goal? And I think everyone can agree that all of those are goals. And then it's like, okay, well, what do we have to do to get there? The methods become less important when we understand the goal and the outcome that we're looking for. And so I think we have to reverse those conversations sometimes, because I have never gone into a briefing room where I said, okay, you guys want to sleep better, do this. And they're like, oh, I'm not going to do that now. They're like, I'll do anything to make sure that I sleep better. Right. So I think that's a really effective strategy. And I think that that can get us out of our own way a little bit and maybe break some misconceptions that we have on some of the methods when we understand what the goal is.
Yeah, and I'm totally going to steal that from your page. I think
Okay.
the outcome driven is huge because I've been in those briefings and we do a monthly training. So we'll get everybody together and we'll just do a training and then we do like our employee appreciation stuff. But yes, that is the kind of engagement you get. If you go in there and you're like, who wants to do a breathing exercise? It would be just kind of a joke. But you're right. You hit the nail on the head. I think if you ask that, because that's a real struggle with us across the board. I mean, there's so much on your mind and so much stuff you're trying to process from the week, the month, the year before that it definitely takes a toll. And the more we can have outcomes, I think the more engagement we can have, because then it forces people to reflect on problems they actually do have. You know, I also love the word woo woo now. I don't know why, but that's a great word. I'm going to start using that.
I've heard everything across the board, like witchcraft and all kinds of crazy stuff. But that's something that I've learned over time through a lot of trial and error. And I think that that's what it takes to find things that are successful. I think sometimes we try one thing, and this could be, from an organizational perspective, like maybe you guys try one provider and it didn't land, and then you never try it again. But I always tell people, I feel like wellness is like dating. Like if you have one bad date, you're probably going to go on another date until you find that person that you want to spend time with. And I think that that's what wellness is how can we have like trials, how can we try things until we find the things that work for us and that are successful. So I feel like we could talk forever, and I know we're running out of time here. One last thing I want to mention before my final question for you is that you are writing a book. So can you just briefly tell us what the book is about and maybe some of the key, learning objectives that you're hoping that people learn from your book?
Yeah. So my book is kind of based on my experiences. it's all about perspective. I've had the opportunity to gain a lot of experience in a short amount of time and experiencing things that I would wish on anyone. And also the lessons that have come from those challenges. And more than anything, it's my goal is if the outcome I'm seeking is if a single officer can be helped, it makes some type of impact to help them through maybe their hardest moment. I will feel like I've accomplished a mission there. The other thing is to pay homage to our lost officers. I feel like the book will help them be remembered in a positive way. And you know, both of those guys were really passionate about service and taking care of others, especially their brothers and sisters at work. And I think there's a lot of lessons there. And if we can keep their names alive, that's something I want to do. So, but the gist of it is leadership, how to overcome trials and tribulations you're going to face, not if, and also to know, you know, what positives can you take out of those challenges as they come. And more importantly is how to make sure you're taking care of yourself to get through this career. Because one thing I've observed over my time, including the police academy, is they don't really cover that topic, right? Of how to get through the hardest times, how to get through things you're going to experience. Maybe it's political challenges, maybe it's loss of a fellow officer, personal life challenges, taking work home. And I basically just put out the best lessons I've learned through my career from some of the best leaders. And I want to share those and pass them forward. And that way I can contribute to the next generation of law enforcement. So that's kind of the gist of my book. But I appreciate you bringing it up.
Yeah, and it's still in progress, right? So you'll have to keep us posted once it's published, and I'll definitely be buying a copy for myself. So I'm looking
Yeah,
forward.
I'll send you a copy. But I've done the first version. I just got to refine it a little bit. And you know, I'm kind of being a perfectionist, to be honest with you. So I got to dial that in, and then I hope to put it out and make it as accessible. And my other intent is to, you know, if we can get enough interest to donate a percentage to fallen officer families in the future, and to partner with another organization that's been doing that, because it's not about that. It's about taking care of the people that take care of others.
Yeah, I love it. Kind of going back to the Hermosi thing that I told you earlier, he said, the people who are truly in your corner will pay full price. So I will be buying a book, and I won't let you convince me otherwise. And then, you know, hopefully that'll be contributed to that organization too. So I'm happy to do that. But my final question for you is for that younger generation, which I know you're kind of a part of that younger generation, but the people who are coming up behind you, the people who are striving to be in leadership roles, who are entering into this career today, what words of wisdom would you share with them that, you know, either you wish you would have known when you were younger, or something that you've learned along the way that you want to pass on to them?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is for them to never lose track of what brought them into the career. There's going to be a lot of noise they're going to face. And after so much time, you know, doing the job, you'll have this tendency to be salty. And what makes cops salty is honestly, it's the system's not perfect. You're going to see injustice. You're going to work really late on a case, and you're going to do all the right things, and you're going to present it, and you're going to hope to help a victim and send someone away for a long time, and then the system will fail, and they'll get off, or the charges won't be acceptable to you, and that you'll feel like you'll hold on to it, right? Kind of what we've been talking about, and it will emotionally impact you. And that will happen time and time again. Or you'll see people get promoted that probably shouldn't have. You'll see yourself get passed over positions that you believe that you should have gotten. And it's easy to fall into that negativity. But every single cop, and I love working with people right out of the academy, they always start for the same reason. It's not about the promotion. It's not about the pay. Certainly not. It's about service and taking care of people and wanting to make a positive impact. And I'll tell you, there's so many cops that will do this for next to no money because they have that passion and they're selfless people, but they lose that along the way.
Mm.
And I think the job will wear at you. So my personal advice is never forget where you came from and stay in touch with why you wanted to do the job. And one of my favorite quotes for this is by Martin Luther King. Um, and I guess it will help you face some injustice throughout your career, but it says, it's the ultimate measure of a man is not where he stands in moments of comfort and convenience, but where he stands at times of challenge and controversy. They get to choose how they face those problems. And I think that's really what's going to measure your character. And it makes the difference between someone that has a long, successful, happy career and someone who doesn't.
I love it. Thank you. Thank you so much for your time. I actually really, really enjoyed this conversation. This was fun. So thank you.
Yeah, likewise.